The thing that I don't really vibe with is before your next trip, research and reflect on the social and environmental impacts where you plan to travel and respect the wishes of local communities. No one's going to do this. Most people are going to go, I want to go to Thailand. I'm going to book that trip and I want to go. Welcome back to the Roamaroo Podcast, where your someday starts here. Today, we're talking about our favorite show, The White Lotus, specifically the White Lotus Effect. From Game of Thrones turning Dubrovnik into a medieval Disneyland to Emily in Paris flooding the French capital with dreamy tourists, movies and TV shows are changing the way we travel. With the rise of destination-driven binge watching, once hidden gems are being catapulted into viral fame overnight. Sicily, Hawaii, and Thailand, places where The White Lotus was filmed, have seen surges in tourism, skyrocketing prices, and changing landscapes. But at what cost? Today, we're diving into the power of pop culture to shape travel trends, the fine line between discovery and destruction, and answering the question, should you change how you travel? So let's get into it. Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about something very famous. I guess maybe you guys have heard of it. It's called the White Lotus Effect. So
Seasons 1 and 2. R.I.P. on that song, by the way. Miss it.
The last episode,
yeah,
they brought back a little bit into the music. So
yep.
I think it's coming back. Tell everyone what the White Lotus Effect is.
Basically, the White Lotus Effect is, in simplified terms, over-tourism. That means too many tourists going to one location. And the White Lotus Effect, let's think about it. It's on a larger scale. These places that the White Lotus is going to, we have Italy, we have Hawaii, we have Thailand. These are not hidden gems, folks. People know about these places. They're going to the Four Seasons Resort. People know about these places. Tourists are already going there. And now more tourists are going there. Can the infrastructure handle all of these tourists? Can the local economy, what is it supporting the local economy? I would say so. But can the resources keep up? Can the people keep up? And is it supporting the right people in said economy? And that's the real question we're going to get into.
I mean, so basically what inspired this discussion was this post that Colette found, and it's called The White Lotus Effect, the Dark Side of Tourism. And just like Colette said, it's basically how the popularity of, well, this is just talking about White Lotus, but I mean, there's so many movies. There's, let's see, Game of Thrones. I mean, if you go to Croatia and you go to Dubrovnik, I mean, everywhere you go, there's signs for tours and see all the famous sites. The beach
in Thailand,
Leonardo DiCaprio back in what
2000
mm-hmm. There's a famous beach there where after that was filmed, well, a few things happened. Well, one, the production crew, there's like you can look it up, but there's basically they like caused so much damage to make the beach look even more idyllic than it already was. And then all the people started coming afterwards, and it's still flooded with tourism. And were there any? I think that's basically it.
I mean,
there's countless others.
Since the creation of Hollywood, They have found in Hollywood there are jobs, location scouts, that their whole job is to find these amazing locations. And once they present them on screen, well, of course people want to go. And that's the whole point of these location scouts. I'm going to present this amazing location and environment of which to tell this story. And now I want to be a part of this story as the viewer, and I want to go to this place. So this has been around since Hollywood's been around.
Think about how cool it used to be a Hollywood scout. Like, you had to be an adventurer, a traveler, because you didn't have Instagram. You were like looking at probably Nat Geo magazines, maybe.
How cool it used to be. I feel like it'd still be really cool.
Well, I guess what I mean by like, you had to do the work. Now you can just be like, what's the coolest spots? And there'll be a top hit list, and then you'll do a little research, contact someone, boom, your job's done.
I think that's how people think the job is.
I mean, you're probably right.
I bet you there's a lot more to it. I mean, also, even when we travel, right, we've found some, and we're not the first to find it. We're explorers, but we're not, the first to find these places like Moustier Sainte-Marie in France. This is a known place amongst Provence, but maybe not amongst most Americans. However, we weren't the first to find it. Instagram has told us that now we've ruined it for people. That's a whole other thing. I think the tricky part that you're talking about is that we're in the age of information. So the way that we receive this information is way more accessible and easier than it used to be when we had to seek out newspapers and specific travel magazines, trade magazines, to learn about these places. Now you don't have to actually get on an airplane and explore. You can explore with your thumbs.
You can. And well, one of the problems too with the Instagram effect is just like the belief that if you don't go to the number one spot, you've ruined your vacation. So one of the flaws of these the freedom of information, you feel like a failure in your vacation if you don't go to the top spots. If you don't go to the most picturesque area and get the photo, then you're kind of comparing yourself, your vacation, to everyone else. And it eliminates all the joys that travel used to have, where you would stumble upon this spot. And now, if you're going to talk about like, well, where does it rank? Is it number 10? Is it number 1? It doesn't matter. In your mind, that was the best spot. It could be a local wine shop in Italy, and all of a sudden you're like, this is amazing. You talk to the owner and you have a great experience, and it may not be the most photogenic, it may not be the best wine, but to you it was the best experience. Now, everyone is looking on their top 10 list, looking at the Google reviews. Oh, it's a 4.3. This is a 4.4. This one has the better photos. And so then everyone flocks to the same spot. And so now, unless you're number 1 or number 2, all of a sudden, all
on
the other
an SEO search.
basically on an SEO search. I
Yeah.
mean, and you see that now you see people changing the names of restaurants, of places to fit into searches. I mean, you'll see it as like the best, like it happens a lot actually with like Chinese restaurants and stuff. It'll be like the best Chinese restaurant, because that they will name their restaurant that, so that when the people search for it, it pops up in the SEO search, things like that.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah.
The point that I want to go back to, you said, and we see it all the time when we travel, is the places, people are searching for the places with the best photos. And it probably sounds ironic coming from a content creator, but those places piss me off because I'm going to call out like the Bali swing.
Yeah. It's cool.
It's cool. And I want to support the local guy. I want to say that the local guys that are doing that are awesome. But the people, just the lack of authenticity and the lack of connection with the actual culture of what you're doing, lining up with other, like Americans and Australians to go take this one photo. I don't know. Part of it rubs me the wrong way of like, is that the way to experience, or am I being judgmental and this is just a new way to experience?
It's a combination, because there's, what popped into my mind is like, no one's going to say that to Scotland when she puts on a princess dress and goes takes photos with the princess, and everyone's doing the same thing. Like, that's what you go to Disney to do.
Yeah.
It's just that it's kind of a new way of tourism to Bali. I mean, I'd say Bali as the collective tourism, but Bali is definitely one of the worst, I don't want to call it offenders, but it just has some of the worst things where you will see lines of people taking the same photo. So, but like it's the same thing at Disney. People are lining up to take the same photo with Aurora. I mean, we waited an hour to meet Elsa and Anna. I mean, it's a little bit different because it's this magical experience for our daughter.
Right.
But no, I get it, because I think the frustration is like there used to be this authenticity of exploration, and because of free access to all the information, no one's exploring. They're just going to get the photo, and they're not going to that place to see it, to enjoy it. They're going to get the photo for other people. Mm-hmm. And we're guilty of it, guys. We get it. Like, that's what we do. But we also see some of the negatives. I mean, we
try not to do
we
that.
try not to, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say years ago, our content used to be more focused on that. It used to follow that idyllic dream world. And we always felt like it just didn't fit. It was like wearing a coat that was like too small or too big. It just was like scratchy. And it took us years for someone to be like, hey, just be yourself. And then once we did that, it's like, oh, this is us. This is what we want to do.
But I think like these things do help support the economy in some sense. And tourism overall is a huge supporter of economies in places like Bali, in places like Thailand. So it's not all bad, but where is that happy middle ground? And I don't have the perfect answer for that, but I think when we were talking about this yesterday, you had some good ideas with like a tax or an entry fee.
So let's get into this this whole post. So this post is by the feminist, and it's called The White Lotus Effect: The Dark Side of Tourism, like we said before. And it talks about, basically, it has some, people talking about how Hawaii has been kind of inundated by over-tourism, and talked about how the same thing has happened to Thailand from the White Lotus. But the thing that really I don't really vibe with is basically it's like, before your next trip, research and reflect on the social and environmental impacts where you plan to travel, and respect the wishes of local communities. I'm sorry. No one's going to do this. I mean, I get this, that we all want to feel like we're going to do this, and I'm going to get some hate from this. We all want to feel like, oh, we're all going to respect this and like do the research. But I'll tell you what, most people are going to go, I want to go to Thailand. I'm going to book that trip and I want to go. My feeling is that if you really want to change people, you have to change the economic incentives. And so you might get a few people who see this and go, well, maybe I shouldn't go to Thailand. There might be a few, but most people are still just going to book that trip and go visit Thailand because they saw how beautiful Thailand is. What you need to do is make incentives to adjust the flow of people. So let's say the beach, for example, where Leonardo DiCaprio goes, which this already might be in place. Because everyone wants to go see that beach, you put taxes on that beach. You make it, hey, you want to go visit? It's a $10 fee, a $15 fee, whatever it is. Adjust that number to a level where all of a sudden the people have been reduced. And I know there's counter arguments where it's, everyone needs to be able to see it. I mean, but maybe not. Like maybe everyone doesn't need to see it because it can't handle everyone going to that beach or that one spot. Because it is a resource. It's a resource that no matter what, even though we're just walking and exploring it, too many people are going to cover it up, are going to damage it just through their footsteps. So that's what's your thoughts on that? I know I'm the more like cynical, like, yeah, we all want to be woo-woo, but I'm sorry, I don't think people are going to be that intrinsically.
I think conversations, I would hope like this, that's the whole point of this, is that we hope that it brings just attention. Like, it's not going to change something, but if you go, oh, now I'm bringing attention to it, I'm aware of it, then you can start to think differently. And you can go, okay, well, maybe I'm not going to go with the big box tour when I go to Thailand, but I'm going to seek out, one of the smaller local people. And I think social media is like this double-edged sword where, yes, it's, advertising for all of these destinations, and that could be a negative in some ways because it contributes to over-tourism. But then social media is great because I can search out a small local vendor and support this person that way. So I think conversations like this and reading that White Lotus Effect, it makes me think, like, how can I support the local people in a way that they'll actually feel it? Not so that it funnels through the Four Seasons or it funnels through, trust me, I love the Four Seasons. I don't want to hate on them. But how can I also support the local people? Because they are doing the work here, right? Like, I want to support a hotel that's hiring local. I want to support tour guides that are trying to make ends meet for their families. So it's seeking out and being an informed tourist or traveler in those ways. And also, maybe, yes, you go visit where the White Lotus was filmed, but then you also go to a different island that doesn't have as much tourism. You seek those things out.
I think it's also, it's not, I think it's changing the mindset of it's not avoiding those places because of over-tourism. I think it's also changed your mindset of just becoming a traveler. So back to the very beginning, we were talking about how it's like everyone's seeking the number one spot. Maybe don't seek that. Maybe just allow your day to happen. I feel like, when we try to do that, because we do both. It's a hybrid of like, you've done the research, we got to go to this restaurant, we got to go here. But there's also days where it's like, we're just walking around. I guess our process during the walking around time is, we have some rules of like, okay, if you're right next to a tourist spot, like the Arc de Triomphe or the Eiffel Tower or whatever, like get a few blocks away. And then kind of the second thing is like, oh, we found something that looks good. Like sometimes right away, like this place is good, let's go. Other times you're kind of in a rush, do a quick search on like, a quick Google search of it and look at TripAdvisor. And if people aren't getting food poisoning, then let's go for it.
Yeah.
So I think I guess I look at it as like, what motivates people is the carrot, not necessarily the stick. And if you're doing this of like, do your research because you shouldn't, overpopulate these areas, I feel like that's kind of like the stick, like, oh, I'm going to feel bad. But I'm kind of looking at it as like the carrot of like, go explore other spots. Like, go find the unknown places. Like, yes, this place is great, but there's lots of other great places that you might find. And you're going to have so much more joy out of that than like knowing exactly how this place looks, exactly how the beach looks. And you show up and you go, yep, this is
That's
where
it.
that's it. Check.
I think also get creative with when you visit. There's an alternative, right? There's a high season in places and there's a low season. And of course, everybody's high season is at the same time because everybody's off from school and can only travel then. Well, instead of going to Positano in August with the rest of the world, what if you could go in October? What if you could go in April? Go in these shoulder seasons or these off seasons when it's not as crowded. And the other thing is like, we can't put everything on the traveler or the tourist, right? This is a collective issue. And it's not just film and TV creating this White Lotus effect. You have tour companies, you have cruises. Cruises are huge offenders. Think about when you're visiting a small island like Santorini. Already you're dealing with overtourism. Then you have 3 huge cruise ships that come in and bring in thousands of people to this small island on one day. Who's keeping them accountable? I mean, love a good cruise ship. You get to go to some really fun islands, but I remember when we were on these islands and we'd see the cruise ships, okay, I can't go into town that day because it's going to be too crowded and I won't be able to walk around. It's not enjoyable. So I think there needs to be limits, and I'm not sure exactly who is putting these limits on these people because ultimately then it's a cap on income for these places that rely on this income to survive. It's really tricky.
It's tough. I mean, if you look at our national parks, like, because I look at everything as just a resource, and we're starting to cap the national parks. They're doing lotteries, and I have my opinions on that. I would like to know where the money's going. I'd like to know who's running these lottery systems.
But talk about the lottery system.
So basically, for example, it's happening a lot, but I think the first time we ran into it was Red Rocks outside of Vegas, and it was pretty easy to get a spot. So it wasn't too hard, at least, but you had to pretty much like book a time where you would enter, and you had to pay like $2.
This was just to enter the park. We had to book a specific time.
Yeah, it's been a few years, but what I remember is you basically had to make a reservation, so you had to book it, but it cost like $2 to book it. And immediately I started thinking, all right, this is one of our national parks. You do have to pay to get into it, which I'm all about paying to get into it. But now you've added this second fee for what? And it's I just was curious, who's getting this money? If it's going to the national parks and it's
you want transparency,
and I want to make sure that this money is supporting the national parks, I'm all for it, 100%.
Or state parks,
yeah, the state parks, wherever it's going to. But yeah, so you had these basically it limits the number of.
Our friend just walked by with like a bicycle and 2 children.
and our daughter's old jacket on. I can
Aww.
see her bright pink jacket. Sorry, I got distracted.
Neighbors. I apologize.
Neighbors. So it limits the number of people who can go in because basically they realized that it was trying to balance the times, because what they had was, let's just say at 10 a.m., everyone wanted to go in, and they're trying to just meter in the people a little bit. And now you're seeing the same thing with very famous hikes like Angel's Landing, Half Dome. They've had permits on Half Dome for a long time, which is very important because if you've ever hiked Half Dome, you have the cables, and the cables are very dangerous.
Yeah,
and
it's a safety issue.
And you can really only have so many people physically on those cables. If you had too many people, I mean, I can only imagine hiking. Well, that, but also how frustrating would it be to hike? What does it take to get up there? Like 6 hours to get to the cables, and then find out like, oh, there's too many people, I can't get to the top. So there's things like that there's just like the cables, for example. You just can't get that many people up there in a day. And you could say the same thing about Santorini, Greece, where it's tight. It's, a maze, and there's really physically only so many people who can fit. And as you said, there's a cap on their income, but also there's definitely some diminishing returns on the number of people who go in there because it's only physically so big. The stores can only handle so many people. So while you say there's a cap, there was already a cap just through physical space. Like we just never had met, we never met that space. One thing that I wanted to call out is in this post, it actually talks about how the beach was closed for 3 years. So the beach, which is Maya Bay in Thailand, there was so much environmental impact that they actually closed it for 3 years before reopening it in 2022 with strict regulations. So they shut that down for 3 whole years.
Yeah, I mean, I think the environmental impact is huge. Polluting waters, destroying coral reefs. You see that in the Great Barrier Reef. Parts have been destroyed because of the sunscreen that went in, and also just lack of knowledge on how to treat a reef with all of these tourists. And so it's really tricky. I mean, I think also there needs to be regulation and rules. People have issues with that, and regulation and government stepping in. But it's for a reason. It's to preserve these places for our generation and future generations. It's to limit the environmental impact. We have to take care of these places or else they're not going to be here in the future. And so we need to, not be as selfish when it comes to these places. And it's not one person's responsibility. It's a lot of people's responsibility. And so I think as a traveler, you have to be a responsible traveler and do your part, whatever that might mean. It's definitely picking up after yourselves when you go to these places. Pack in, pack out. When, whatever you pack in to camp, pack out with you. Take your trash out. Don't litter. We really need to preserve these places. And that's something that feels small, but it makes a big impact.
So we've talked a lot about, I think, the environmental side of places. We talked about the beach. We talked about the national parks. What about the people? For example, White Lotus, the show we love and cringe, a lot of the dynamic is like the power dynamic of the tourists and the locals.
Yeah.
How can people, for example, I feel like Hawaii, that was the first season. And we know, in the show, it shows it, how you have this imbalance of power between the actual tourists and the locals. What can people do to kind of, I don't know, if it's feel good about themselves, to kind of balance this out? Let's say you're going to the quote White Lotus in Maui. What should people look for? Which is the Four Seasons, by the way.
In Maui. Yeah. I think it's seeking out local restaurants, talking to people when you're there is a huge thing, and it's a lost art. We're just looking online of where's the best place to go for this. Why don't you ask someone? That's like the OG traveler, right? Like, I think something we try to do, and it leads to the best days possible, is plan out where your breakfast is or plan out where your lunch is, and then leave it open and say, I have to talk to other people to figure out where I'm going next. It's like a little treasure hunt. And I think that's a really great way. Who cares if it's on a list? It's on a local list, or drop into a local CrossFit or a workout class and talk to people there.
How about the probably one of the best times this ever happened was Dublin.
Oh, that's great.
Obviously there was beer involved, and I don't even know how we
probably hard alcohol as well.
How we met. We started talking to the bartender
early.
I mean, this was early in the day. And we basically said, hey, where should we go next? And he made a list of like 10 bars. And we said, well, what order should we go in? It was like our own little Chat GPT before Chat GPT existed. And the guy made us a bar crawl. And I think he even told us specific drinks.
Yes, he did.
And so we did it, and it was the best because, we'd had a drink or two at his place. And then we did this bar crawl, and we showed back up at, I don't know, 6, 7 in completely different mindset. And he's like, oh my God, you're back. I can't believe it. How was it? And we started talking to him and took a shot. And then I think we
really needed one at that point.
And then I think we went to bed at 7 p.m. that night.
But this is what we're talking about.
But I also think there's this, I'll call it feeling or concern of the power dynamic of like the White Lotus.
Yeah.
But also, I don't think people should feel bad about if they have the ability to go to places like this. You know, if you're going to go travel, like go travel. These places are very dependent. Mm-hmm. Their dependence on the travelers and the tourists is almost number one. And so go there, like spend your money, have fun. Like Colette said, like get out, try to get outside. I understand that there's, you know, you want to go to the quote White Lotus and stay and be taken care of. And that's good. You know, sad. I don't want to say, I bet if you were to break down the percentage of money, like it's, what actually, that'd be a great question. I don't know if there is an amount.
Question.
Like, you know, let's say you spend the White Lotus, for example, would be very easy to spend. I keep saying the White Lotus. Let's just call it Four Seasons. The Four Seasons Maui, it'd be very easy to spend $10,000 if you did a week stay there. Yeah. Very easy. We have not stayed there. Four Seasons, if you want us to come, let us know. We'd love to check it out ourselves. But like, let's say you have $10,000 you spent. What percent do you think actually goes to the people, to the local community? I'm going to say like 30. I'm going to hope.
That's something good to hope for. I'm really not sure of the financial logistics there. That's tricky. I don't know. I think probably the responsible traveler should maybe not stay there.
I'm never going to say you should not stay with somewhere for a responsible traveler.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you just want to put that badge on your sleeve and be like, I'm a responsible traveler, I didn't stay there, then feel free to do it. But I wouldn't be like, I'm not staying there because I'm a responsible traveler. If I can afford it,
in other ways.
Yeah. If I can afford it, I'm going to go there, and I'm trying to find out if it actually says what percent.
I think it's being cognizant of like the privilege that you go in with and not trying to be like a colonialist, like going in as the white man. You have to be like aware of what you represent there and be kind and contribute in your way, and not just expect these places to work for you. You know, it's like, I'm there in your home. Let me be respectful. That's all.
It's an interesting dynamic because in the end, most people are going to make decisions based on financial pieces. You know, so if they look at the Four Seasons and it's a $10,000 sticker price, like, and there's a competitor out there, let's, you know, the St. Regis, I don't think anyone's going to look at one of those and be like, oh, this person donates 10% to the local community and this one only donates 5%.
If it's an advertising point, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like Tom's Shoes, how they give back. You know, if it's a hotel's unique selling point, then maybe. Hotels, if you're listening. Are you listening?
I do think hotels should do it. I mean, I think that's kind of, because basically either that or the local communities need to be fighting for the tax, you know, the tax incentives. And when it comes to those fees, those resort fees and whatnot, you know, they can add up, but it's like if they're going back to the community and they are building infrastructure, just like the fees for the national parks, like, okay, I'm all for it.
You know what some hotels do? I remember it was an environmental impact that they were trying to contribute to, is like rebuilding the coral reef. And they had ways that you could do that as a guest at the hotel. So getting involved with, you know, positive environmental impacts on the island or in the destination that you're in, that's something that's really cool. I also want to point out that we went on a press trip. So meaning like a place hired us to go experience this destination. And they wanted us to take some great photos at this really unique local spot. But they said, do not share where it is.
Oh, in Idaho?
We were in Idaho.
Yeah.
And so we went and we're like, we can't share it. No, we want to preserve it.
Yeah.
So at least, like, I think it's those small things. And then there's the other part of me that's like, but wait, other people want to access this too. And like, do we want equal access? It's like a whole mindset of like democracy. Like, does everyone have equal access or not? And you know, we respected that we didn't share where this really cool spot was. in terms of like coordinates or anything like that. But people could go seek it out. And I think it also is kind of fun for people to go seek things out, just like our little treasure hunt in Dublin.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have happened, even if I saw, I don't know, if someone said like, go to this bar, go to that bar, like it just felt better to hear it from a local.
Let's talk about some of what we love. Let's talk a little bit of White Lotus, the show. Why do you think people love it so much? Like, I mean, it's basically just rich people on vacation.
Oh, well, it's talking about deeper societal values, contrasts, caste systems, things that we say like aren't present in modern day times, but very much are. And the lens into the tourism world, like that's a huge lens into this. Like you can see the caste system at play. And then how does that work around the world?
There's scenes that make your skin crawl. And I don't know why, like, you want to watch. It's like touching a bruise. That's what it is. In the beginning, it's all very awkward. You're like building this tension. Mike White, the creator, just builds this tension and you're like, oh, my skin's starting to crawl, right? And then the theme comes in a few episodes. I mean, it is kind of like the lifestyles of the rich and famous almost pulled. It's like the lifestyles of the rich and famous, but they've pulled back the theatrical curtain and added drama to it because they show it's not perfect or they show the imperfections and the flaws of these people. It's almost like it's too good to be true. You see these characters who, this season, like the guy's super...
Spoiler alerts, potentially.
Spoiler alerts, who's super wealthy, but then he's running from the FBI, things like that.
Yeah.
If you could go to any of the 3 locations, where would you go? So you have Italy.
Yeah.
Taormina, Italy.
Taormina.
Koh Samui, Thailand. And
Maui.
Maui, Hawaii.
Let's just take the Four Seasons jet and go to all 3. That would be the dream.
Which, for those of you who don't know, and you have an extra, like, what is it, $50,000 to spend?
$1 million. No, I don't know what it is.
No, it's only like $50,000.
Only.
Well, you said $1 million. I mean, comparative to...
But for a couple, it's probably 100, right?
It's something like that. So you can do the Four Seasons jet, which we have a friend who actually got to go on that.
Was a lucky ducky.
Q Katie got to do it as a project. We're super jealous. But there's the Four Seasons jet, and surprisingly, it only runs its advertisements in like the Wall Street Journal
and the Rob Report.
I mean, I don't happen to see many ads on Instagram pop up for it, but it does exist. Yeah, and you fly around over like 2-3 weeks and basically hit like all the famous Four Seasons. So if you're feeling like, hey, I need to hit all 3, you can do the jet.
And I'll help book it for you because I am a travel agent.
I think right now, Italy would be 3rd because we've been to Europe.
Really?
Recently. Yeah. Hawaii or Thailand. I mean, God, they're so amazing. If I could just be transported there, probably Thailand.
If you could be transported.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thailand is just... And Koh Samui, we've been to Koh Samui 3 times.
Yeah.
And also, spoiler alert, if you're watching the show, they are all over Thailand. They are not...
Yeah, this isn't just Koh Samui. Like when they're out on the yacht and there's the huge island spiking from the sea, that's definitely in the south by Krabi.
Yeah, Coco and I are like, that's not in Koh Samui. And then when they're the most recent episode, they're like, oh, we're going to take a boat, and we're making jokes like, well, you got to go. That's going to be like an overnight trip because that's not in the same ocean. That's a different ocean.
Yeah. So
where would you go?
I mean, my first thought was Italy.
Interesting.
But I'm Italian and I want to go there and I just love Italy. But yes, I think if travel time was not a factor, it would be Thailand. That would be great. I love Hawaii too. I would never turn that down. But yes, Thailand.
Do you think
the people, the food?
Do you think the show is changing the way people travel outside of just visiting the places? Like, do you think people are thinking about travel more, or like reviewing their thoughts of travel?
Yes, I think that a popular show like this will have an actual ROI on the destination's tourism.
No, I meant like, are people now going, I don't want to be a White Lotus-er?
Oh.
Am I like, am I this spoiled brat, or does it just wash right off?
Potentially. But I think if you're looking at the type of person that is on the show, they're not the most self-aware. Not to say that anyone that stays at a hotel like that isn't self-aware, but no, I don't think it's dissuading them. I think it might have them ask some questions, but I don't think people are saying I'm that person ever. They're thinking they're a good guy.
Do you think it brews unhappiness in people viewing the show?
Does it brew unhappiness?
So, and basically what I'm seeing is like, what I mean by like unhappiness is like you have the typical person who's been dreaming of a vacation, and then they watch this show and they're just like, wow, that is like, and then they look at the actual Four Season prices and be like, there's no way I could afford that.
Yeah.
Because like the average person,
that happens.
Yeah, the average person is like, oh, that looks amazing. I would guess most people go, where are they staying? And then they look it up and they realize, and I don't even know, but I'm going to guess each one of those hotels is probably $1,500 a night.
That's
minimum.
what I would guess as well.
Minimum.
Yeah. I mean, I just had a client reach out to me and say, I want to go to Taormina, Sicily, because I watched The White Lotus. So yeah, it happens. But they also said, I don't think I can afford to stay there. So it was like, okay, well, it inspired me to go to the destination, but I might not stay at the hotel.
And here's a shortcut to it. If you want to go to those places, often you can just have dinner there.
Yes, you can.
So,
and that's a wonderful entree, an expensive entree.
Still expensive, but
not as expensive.
But not $1,500 a night.
You can still send the kids to college and go eat there, hopefully.
I think it's, this post that you kind of shared about, you have people talking about the effects of the tourism on places. Mm-hmm. It's this double-edged sword where you've got, Hawaii, for example. I mean, I know there's other economies, but tourism is one of their biggest economies. And, it really just, it requires, yes, people need to be aware. And I think you need to have, you need to have awareness of it. But the awareness of it isn't going to stop people from going. The awareness of it will make people speak up and say, hey, I think you need to change some of this regulation. I think you need to possibly I believe it should be the taxes and, de-incentivize the people so that not as many people are going. But yeah, it's, I don't think just out of goodwill, people are going to avoid it. If you look at, I look at, I'm going to get very philosophical, but like if you look at game theory, when it comes to the decision of that, the default people are still going to make that decision. And so it's going to require like a bigger movement to kind of push people to stop that. And I think it should be the local governments who increase taxes, and hopefully there's not corruption. Hopefully that money goes back to rebuilding the infrastructure. And
describe what you mean by game theory. So,
man, I am not an expert in game theory by any means, but basically the simple idea of game theory is the first one that starts out as a prisoner. And I'll try to keep this short, but basically you have two prisoners, they're put in separate rooms. And the thought experiment is like, okay, if you tell the crime, you potentially, so basically your options are you tell the crime or you don't tell the crime.
You snitch or you don't snitch.
And so it's one of those things where if you both don't tell the crime, then you get off for free. If your friend tells the crime but you don't, you go to jail for 5 years, and they don't go to jail. I think I messed up one. If you both admit to the crime, you only go for 1 year. If you admit but they don't, then you get off free. And so you'd have to like chart this out to see it. But basically the incentive falls down to the likelihood is most people are just going to admit to the crime. And it's the same thing as reverse when it comes to going on vacation. So if no one goes on vacation, you look at the benefit of like, oh, there's no deforestation. They're not over inundated. But if I go and you don't, like I get the benefit of going on vacation. So you can play it out basically from a broad strokes of what the population is going to do. If nothing else changes, everyone's going to go on vacation. The same thing can be applied to environmentalism. It's this whole belief of like, if I have to put this effort in of sorting my plastics and not buying a gas guzzling car, but I don't get the benefit of having those things, If everyone does it, we all benefit. But if I do it and you don't, like I still get some benefit. So then most people just don't worry about the environment unless they're forced to, be it through taxes, be it through, your trash pickup and whatnot. So that's what game theory is. There's probably plenty of videos to break it down, but that will kind of help you understand the decision-making process of most humans, because it's all just emotional, incentives.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Thank you for sharing.
Did that make sense?
That did. I just wanted you to go to detail for it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think ultimately when you travel, Traveler 101, don't be a jerk.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just bring an open mind and try to be kind to people, ask questions, get curious, all the things of like how to be a good human, bring that wherever you go, and be a good representation of where you come from too, right? Like the ugly American gets like a very bad rap around the world, and we try to dispel that myth.
Yes.
So just be a good person.
And if you get to go to any of the White Lotus hotels, or any of the Four Seasons, let us know how it was.
Yeah, we'll be salivating over here.
Yeah, so. All right, guys, thanks so much.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you're learning from and or enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram and TikTok. These are great free ways to support this podcast. Also, please subscribe to this podcast on both Spotify and Apple. On both of those platforms, you can leave us up to a 5-star review, which would help us out greatly. Please also check out the sponsors mentioned in today's episode. That's the best way to support this show. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, please put those in the comment sections in YouTube. And yes, we do read all the comments.